They say the law is blind, but in South Africa, justice has a strange way of seeing exactly who stands before it. And on Monday, inside the Gauteng High Court in Pretoria, all eyes turned once again to the man who has lived more lives in the courtroom than most lawyers, former President Jacob Zuma. But this time, the question before the court wasn't about state capture, corruption, or political interference. It was something far more fundamental, far more symbolic. A battle over who should bear the cost of a past soaked in legal warfare. Should Zuma personally repay the R28.9 million in state-funded legal fees he benefited from for years? Or is he merely a convenient target while the real culprits, the state officials who authorized the payments, walk away untouched? The confrontation played out like a slow-burning political thriller. Zuma's advocate, the Boni Msuku, stood before Judge Anthony Miller, arguing that the previous judgments which ordered repayment never explicitly stated that Zuma himself must be the one to pay. According to Msuku, it was a critical oversight, one that transformed Zuma from a beneficiary into a scapegoat. Msuku told the court that Judge Miller had misinterpreted the earlier rulings by the full bench and the Supreme Court of Appeal. Those judgments declared the payments to be unlawful irregular expenditure, yes, but they never explicitly placed the legal debt on Zuma's shoulders. Instead, they simply ordered that the funds be returned to the state. Msuku insisted the judgment held Zuma liable without any legal basis, and he painted a picture of a former head of state being set up to take the fall for decisions made by others in government. His argument was sharp. How can a man be forced to repay money when courts have never found that he acted unlawfully or fraudulently in receiving it? Judge Miller immediately pushed back. If Zuma benefited from a money, if millions in taxpayer funds were spent defending him in case after case, how could he be exempt from accountability? Zuma may not have authorized the payments, but he was undeniably the primary beneficiary. Was that not enough? Msuku stood firm. He said the law could not twist itself simply because the public expects Zuma to pay. The state attorney had taken the decision to fund Zuma's legal costs. The President of the Republic at the time had endorsed it. These officials were custodians of the public purse, and it was they, not Zuma, who had acted unlawfully. The decisions were later overturned, yes, but Zuma himself had never demanded the funding. According to Msuku, he merely accepted the state's determination that he was legally entitled to it as per long-standing policy for sitting and former presidents facing litigation related to their official duties. It was here that Msuku delivered the line that echoed through the courtroom. Zuma is not the wrongdoer. He is merely the easy target. He accused the state of choosing the path of least resistance, going after the person most politically unpopular rather than holding its own officials accountable. It was a provocative argument, one that sought to relocate the blame away from Zuma and back onto the machinery of government. If this was truly about justice, he argued, then those who authorized the unlawful expenditure should face consequences. They should be the ones paying. Instead, the state has taken no disciplinary steps, initiated no repayment claims, pursued no internal action. The officials have simply faded into the background while the spotlight remains firmly on Zuma. Msuku urged Judge Miller to grant leave to appeal, either back to a full bench or directly to the Supreme Court of Appeal, insisting that higher courts would see the flaws in the ruling. But the state was ready with its rebuttal. Advocate George Avakamides representing the president and other government departments argued that Msuku was trying to rewrite history. The earlier judgments, he said, made it unequivocally clear that Zuma was liable. They may not have spelled his name out in bold letters, but the implication was unmistakable. The beneficiary must repay the unlawfully spent funds. Those courts had intentionally avoided a long detour into internal state failures because they understood a basic principle of public finance. No official can authorize illegal expenditure on behalf of a private individual. Zuma had been the recipient. Therefore, Zuma must repay. Avakamides told the court bluntly, it is not for Judge Miller to revisit or reinterpret settled law. The question of liability was already determined. Msuku also took issue with Judge Miller's earlier order requiring Zuma to pay interest on the R28.9 million interest calculated at the prescribed legal rate. He insisted that the issue of interest had never formed part of the original application except for the Democratic Alliance who had raised it. Msuku argued that adopting the DA's position wholesale was procedurally unfair, but to the state this was a distraction. Zuma owes the money, interest and all. Without the interest, the state would in effect lose value on funds that were unlawfully diverted for over a decade. The logic, the state argued, was straightforward. If Zuma had never received unlawful funding, the money would have remained in the state's control, earning value. Therefore, repayment must include interest. Before the appeal application, Judge Miller had already ordered Zuma to pay the R28.9 million within 60 days, failing which the state could seize his assets. That ruling shook the political landscape, not only because of the amount involved, but because it symbolized an end to decades of state-funded legal protection for Zuma. But for now, thanks to the appeal application, that order is suspended. The courtroom on Monday felt less like a legal proceeding and more like a decisive chapter in the long twisting saga of Jacob Zuma's relationship with the law. 4 years, his battles have defined South Africa's political narrative. The legal fees case is different. Not about grand corruption, but about accountability for public money spent in the shadows of political power. Msuku's argument taps into a deeper national discomfort. State officials often act with impunity and taxpayers rarely see them held accountable. Why? Msuku asked, should Zuma be singled out simply because he is a symbol of controversy? His message was clear. If this is about justice, then justice must be evenly applied. But the state's counterargument is just as forceful. No beneficiary of unlawful expenditure should be allowed to keep the benefit. Zuma may not have acted unlawfully in requesting the funding, but once a court determines the payments were irregular, the money must return to the state. This is not merely a legal battle. It is a philosophical one. It goes to the heart of how we define responsibility in government. Are public officials solely responsible for unlawful decisions? Or do beneficiaries also carry accountability? Should taxpayers fund a president's private court battles? If so, under what circumstances? And when does benefit become liability? For Zuma, the stakes are enormous. Our 28.9 million is more than a bill. It is a symbol of the collapse of the system that once insulated him from consequences. His supporters view this as another attempt to destroy him politically ahead of a turbulent election cycle. His critics see it as long overdue accountability. Judge Miller has reserved judgment on the leave to appeal. Whatever he decides, the consequences will reach far beyond the courtroom. If leave is denied, Zuma will face one of the most personally devastating legal orders of his life. If leave is granted, the case could escalate into a major constitutional drama that revisits old wounds about presidential power, public funding, and state accountability. At its core, this battle is about more than money. It is about legacy. It is about the state trying to reclaim what it lost while Zuma tries to rewrite his place in the narrative. And it is about a country still grappling with the cost, financial, political, and emotional, of a presidency that shaped an entire era. And so once again, South Africa waits. A nation suspended between past and future. A former president fighting not for liberty or political survival this time, but for financial absolution. And a court system that must decide whether justice means punishing beneficiaries of wrongdoing or the official